Once Pyro arrives, all those nasty PvPers and pirates are going to leave Stanton. They're going to go to Pyro, and things are going to be great. There's going to be no more griefing, no more pad ramming. It's going to be another golden age for Star Citizen. Yes and no. I think that what you're going to see when Pyro arrives is that obviously we are going to see a Pyro preview at CitizenCon. We are going to get this. And there's going to be, nebula / asteroid fields that are probably a lot denser than the ones that we're used to now. There's going to be lightning effects in them. It's going to be a much more scenic, a much more beautiful system. I think that what we saw, little, peaks of it, I think a couple of years ago, we're going to see, a much improved version, And along with that, I think that CIG is going to make Pyro a very enticing place. Not just for pirates. I mean, the obvious being, it's a system not monitored by satellites and law enforcement, so you can kind of be left to your own devices. But I think that there's going to be, in general, huge financial enticements. We're very used to the trade economy, as an example, within the Stanton system, but this isn't really like solar or inter-solar trade. This is just trade within a star system, and so this is kind of low-level trade that we're doing. And so the profit margins for traders are just really, they're not that good because you're not really doing all that much. Whereas if you were to do much more long-haul trades, or you were to go to an area like Pyro where it's a somewhat depleted, if not entirely depleted system in certain regards, though I do think there are going to be some pockets of some very valuable minerals there, you're going to see that there's going to be a lot more profit to be had in Pyro, and that is going to entice players to make the leap into Pyro, even the players who ordinarily wouldn't go for that. I mean, you're going to be looking at bounties that are going to be much more valuable because you have to hop over to another system into a much more unsafe area to collect those bounties. So in general, things are going to be a lot more profitable. But I think that it's also going to be a lot more deadly. And so the players who choose not to brave that will deal with smaller profit margins, and they'll focus on working in volume, whereas the players who are looking for more money per hour or whatnot are going to look at Pyro very, very seriously. But at the same time, it's probably going to be enough that people are going to start thinking about, well, I just don't want to solo. Now I have an enticement, a reason to bring along my friends. Up till now, bringing along your friends has been more of a fun and friendship thing than it has been a profit thing. When you look at the rewards for the average mission and you split them amongst the participants, the rewards get very piddly very quick. You're going to see a lot more reason to go out there with your Caterpillar with all your turrets manned, and all your command stations on your bridge manned. That's where I think, that is going to go. Numbers, we'll have to wait and see. But I would imagine if I were sitting in the helm and kind of deciding how Pyro is going to work and in its relationship with Stanton, that's what I would aim for, because I would want to entice multiplayer gameplay. I would want to entice, if multiplayer gameplay isn't your thing, manning certain stations on your ship with NPCs, which is something that I think is probably a lot closer than we may initially believe. I think that is going to be something that just kind of lands in our lap with very little notice, maybe a quarter and a half's worth of warning, and we are going to have that. And it is going to transform the way we play a lot of ships, and for some people, the ships that we play. That's I mean, the pirates are going to move out, but the players are going to be, they're going to be very covetous of those rewards, and it's going to draw them into that more dangerous space. There's going to be a reason to go. And I don't think that that's a bad design. I think that that's a really good idea. If you think about it, Ruin Station in a depleted system is probably going to need a lot of things. Food, booze, drug. Well, probably no. Drugs are probably going to be what you bring back from Ruin Station. And that might actually be a point where we actually see the drug trade actually transform in SC from the very limited version that it is now to being a much more free market, where a place like Grim Hex is seen as a hub where people who traffic within the confines of legal space come to pick up their drugs, but their drugs are made in Pyro, and the people who bring it over from Pyro probably see a larger margin than the people who pick it up from Grim Hex and then, traffic it across the empire. That's kind of where I expect things to go. The way I kind of feel that things are going to develop, and once again I'm basing this on past experience, is I feel that ultimately where we're going to kind of end up is not unlike EVE Online and its relationship between Empire, low sec, high sec, and then 0-0. There are going to be players, and I'm, once again, remember, when I'm talking about EVE Online, I'm talking about my experiences playing EVE Online, which are not current experiences. But, going back in the day in EVE Online, players who stayed in Empire generally started to work on, what was called at the time, I don't know if it still is, comments for corrections below, but they were called level 4 missions. And these would generally offer some pretty high rewards, especially if you had a good ship and you knew how to run them. And some players would just never leave Empire. They would go and they would run these level 4 missions. They would crank out tons of money, and they would use that to buy whatever they wanted that may normally have to be found in 0-0. Whereas the players who went out in 0-0 would often be going looking for the officer spawns and the complexes and all that stuff like that. Once again, we're talking way back in the day. And I think that, the potential for fast, big money is going to be in the low security to no security areas. And the high security areas are going to be less money, but much more predictable incomes and much safer gameplay. Not entirely 100% never going to get scratched gameplay, but for the most part, genuinely a reasonably safe experience. Now, of course, this does raise a question, because there is another similarity between EVE Online and Star Citizen, which is using a gate to jump from one system to another, which is a system that I'm sure you're aware, I've expressed this before, I am not a fan of. I personally think that that's like the worst idea. I really do think that, to a certain degree, Elite Dangerous kind of hit the nail on the head. I know that Elite is having some issues right now. We've got a few new players from the Elite world recently. I wonder what happened. But I think that when you basically use your frameshift drive, I believe so, to jump from one system to another, you end up at a certain point around a start, but there's no way to predict where you're going to enter that system exactly. And of course, there's a vast area or potential area where you could end up when you're traveling to that star system, unless the player and the pursuer both leave the same star system heading to the same star system. It's unlikely that you're going to wind up right on top of each other when you get there. And with EVE, there was always the problem of camping access points to 0, and camping certain control points within 0. And oops. Not that bad. Just a scratch. But that I was never a fan of that. I always thought that was so stupid, because it always created the problem of when you're loading from one area to another. I mean, you even see it in Star Citizen now. Sometimes when you're warping to a distant space station, a planet, a asteroid belt, you have to wait for everything to populate up. Sometimes it does it fairly instantaneously, like you see on the screen now. Other times it takes a few seconds. But when you're there, even though you're not seeing things, the things that are already there and have everything loaded up are definitely seeing you. And that few seconds can definitely mean the difference between life and death, or even just severe damage, crippling damage to your ship. And so I hope that when they do kind of make that system where you're flying through the quantum tunnel or whatever, and you're traveling to wherever you're going to be, that tunnel basically functions as it should, as a loading screen, and that you don't actually appear at your location or leave the tunnel from your perspective until you have fully loaded everything. As long as they kind of do that, and I think it's reasonable to expect that they will, that's a pretty good starting point. But I'm still not a fan of the idea of it being like a strategic control point. I've never enjoyed that. At least I never did in EVE Online. I always thought like gate camping was kind of lame, and I always kind of preferred just a straight up fleet battle. And I still miss the days when it was just two big fleets of battleships with Tech 2 components just sniping each other out and warping in and warping out from different directions and lining up and calling targets. That was so fun. And when that kind of went away and started to die off, that was kind of when I started to lose my interest in it, unfortunately. But yeah, I hope that maybe the experience of doing this in the alpha is going to maybe cause CIG to maybe think about, okay, you use the same tunnel, you use the same gateway to leave a system to go to another system, but where you end up in the receiving system isn't through a similar gate, and rather it drops you off at a random point somewhere within the star system, within reason, not just like, oh, I dropped out, next to planet 1, but my buddy dropped out in what would be the, the equivalent of the Oort cloud in that system, like almost a light year away. Well, no, but you know what I'm saying, right? Now I'm going to have to go and look up how far away the Oort cloud is, how many astronomical units. But you know what I mean? I just don't want the point where you come into a system to be predictable. I want, whether you're the defender or the attacker, I don't want you to know where that person's going to come in. Even from the point of view of, let's say, a pirate who might be out there in an exploration ship, waiting to see who comes into the system, possibly with a big juicy load of cargo, trying to deliver it to Ruin Station and make the big bucks. I don't think that, even from my perspective, that it's fair that I know where you're going to enter the system and I can sit there and kind of camp you out and wait for you. Even if there's defenses at the gate, I still have a pretty good idea where you're going. I feel that, along with the reservations I have about quantum in general, I feel that it should be a little bit more cat and mouse. And I don't know. I mean, I'll wait and see, but I'm still not a big. Let's just say that system, traveling between one control point to another to travel between two star systems, or traveling from one defined point to another, I have yet to be convinced that that's a good idea. I think that would probably be the best way to put it. I have yet to be convinced. Now, of course, we kind of come to that point where you say like, oh, okay, well, it's going to be this way, whether you like it or not. Well, unfortunately, that's not guaranteed. And this is one of those areas where things become a little bit unclear. They become a little bit fuzzy because when you're dealing with early access games, you really have to understand that there's early access and then there's air quotes early access, And what I mean by that is sometimes you're sold a game which is believed to be a finished product or very close to it, but they just, they kind of want to get their money now, and haven't cleaned out all the bugs, but the alpha is completely finished. They figured out generally how everything's going to be working. It's all just about, polish and putting things together, neatly and making sure everything works as seamlessly as it can, realistically. And then there's true early access where you're getting something where it's like, here are kind of a whole bunch of parts. There's a whole bunch of parts missing, and we're not really sure what we're going to do with this yet. And we're not really sure what we're going to do with that. This is what we're aiming for. This is what we hope to achieve. And we're going to try a few things to get to that area. I mean, like you see the UI in my Vanguard. This is a UI that if you've been playing Star Citizen and flying ships since 2014, you'll say, this has gone through quite a few changes. And the broader game is probably going to see some very big changes and some very interesting, moves made by CIG as more and more systems come online and CIG is forced to contend with a lot of problems that have been kind of brewing in the background that a lot of players aren't aware of, that kind of come into conflict when you try to use them. Think of it this way. If whenever you're trying to set up your control scheme for any game, whether it's Star Citizen, whether it's, World of Warcraft, whether it's any RPG, anything like that, when you're trying to set up your keybinds and your control scheme, in your head, you'll design something that, okay, this is where I'll put this ability, this is where I'll put that ability, this is how I'll do all this. But through playing it, all of a sudden you realize, there's conflicts here. Like, there are times when my thumb needs to be on this button, but at the same time, I may need to do something else, and I was using my thumb for that as well on another button, and so my thumb can't do both at the same time, so I've got to move that. And that's sort of analogous to what CIG is going to kind of go through as this game continues to develop. They're going to find that there are things that sometimes we're pretty good at picking them out for them, but there are certain things that are in conflict that they didn't originally perceive would be in conflict. And, things are going to change. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. I can't wait for Pyro to launch. I'm going to jump in there, the first chance I get. It's going to be cool. I think it's going to be a cool looking system, and it's going to be an interesting place to play. And I mean, the lawlessness certainly has its appeal, but I'm more curious to see what the financial disparity is between playing in there and playing in Stanton, to see how wide the difference is. Obviously, I predict that it's going to be quite substantial, but it's going to be interesting to watch how that plays out. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.